Welcome to the Truth and Dare podcast with Dr. Nandi Shareef, where we shine a light on how embracing everyday vulnerabilities helps us live fuller and more authentic lives. Tune into our podcast to hear how women practice accepting and loving the most vulnerable parts of themselves. And then stay for the pep talks about creating the space to do it yourself. Are you ready to jump into this episode, sis? Yes? All right? Then let's get it. Welcome to the Truth Then Dare podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nandi Shareef, and today we're talking about an important truth. When we heal ourselves, we heal others. I have an amazing guest co-host with me today. She's the founding partner of Written on Purpose Communications, a full-service boutique writing services firm that provides ghostwriting and developmental editing services, as well as executive communications. She's a self-professed word nerd who spent nearly 6 years in internal communications with Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida, where her contributions helped earn a 2011 Silver Magnum Opus Award for print publication Best Feature Article. She's the author of the upcoming solo book project, The Lizard in My Garage, and she's my book editor and a powerful sister who I've adopted as my big sister, Ellena Balkcom. Welcome, Ellena.
Thank you, Nandi. You make me sound fantastic. Do that again.
Well, you are absolutely fantastic. That's why I like to call you Big Sister, because I learn so much from you and I get so much from our conversations and the lives that we've had together. And it's been, 13 years now. That, can you believe it? It makes me sound like I'm in my middle age, which I don't want to claim yet. But that's how long we've known each other. You saw me when I was a spry young chicken, and now I'm a little less spry, but I'm still chicken, okay? What's really interesting in our time knowing each other, Ellena, is I found out that adulthood has a lot of challenging events. You already knew that, but I just learned because when we met, I was just entering adulthood. And as we go through these challenging things in adulthood, it's been really hard for me to navigate it. And for most of my adulthood, I've been single. I haven't had a fiance, which I have now, or any children or anything like that. And so I can only imagine that if it was hard for me to do single, how even crazier it must have felt to do it in front of someone else. You went through a series of life experiences and events with a little appendage, also known as your incredible daughter, Jordan. And you went through this process of going through those events, but also having to heal yourself and watching the impact of how she healed in the process of watching you and witnessing you. And so I'm hoping to spend some time today talking about that and helping the sisters who are listening to the podcast learn more about how you did it. Does that sound all right?
Sounds fantastic. Let's do it.
Excellent. So we are going to start with what it was like for you moving from Orlando, Florida to Savannah, Georgia, and take us through some of your thoughts, your feelings, and the experiences you had as you were making the transition.
It was a difficult transition, but it was one that I was really ready for. So I had been in Orlando, Florida for nearly 8 years at that time. I had spent about 6 employed with Walt Disney World, fantastic brand. I was working in corporate communications and writing to audiences of 62,000 employees at the time. And I felt like I was at somewhat of a pinnacle in my corporate career. But this entrepreneurship tug never left me. I knew I wanted to take that leap, but when you're in a very secure, stable place like Disney, one that you're told either directly or indirectly that you should never leave, because if you do, it'll be virtually impossible to get back. I act very intuitively normally. So I thought, I'll know when it's time to go. But I didn't anticipate how connected I would be to comfort and stability at that time. And it was because I had a child and I was married at the time. It was scary. It was really scary to make the decision to voluntarily, because I had just gone through, Disney had done a layoff, which was not typical for that company, as most of us know. And I had made it through that layoff with very little tenure compared to most. So I felt God was forcing me to voluntarily decide to leave my cushy, stable environment, family friendly Orlando, and follow my husband with the job relocation to Savannah, Georgia, where I knew not a soul, had never even visited. I just felt like at that point I was not only choosing my family, because I didn't think the marriage could take another commuter situation, but I felt like I was also choosing myself. I was early 40s at that
Mm.
time. So if not now, when was the question I had to continue to ask myself. So I did it. I left. I remember sitting in the Disney parking lot watching all the gray and black suits enter into the building I worked in, the name tags, the little lunch boxes, and they were so happy. And I felt such a tug that it's something more, it's something different. Not necessarily better, just more of me that was left to be discovered and put into the world, more of the world to be experienced. And I just couldn't shake it. So it was scary, but I left. I packed a U-Haul and my fifth grader or upcoming fifth grader. And we joined my husband, who had been 5 months in Savannah. And that's where we met.
Yes, we did. We had a mutual friend who introduced us and said we absolutely needed to know one another. And he was right because we've been together ever since. I remember meeting you, Ellena, I remember meeting you and feeling so overwhelmed. And I've said this to you several times. After talking with you, I went home and I called my mom and I said, Mom, for the first time, I've met a woman who has fully intact self esteem. I don't know who raised her. I don't know what happened, but this woman like knows she's God's gift, not in an arrogant way, but like really truly knows that she's here for a reason. Life is good. I'm great. I'm solid. If anybody has an issue, it's theirs. It's not mine. And I was so thrown by it. And I was so entranced by you and by the things that you had to say. And so soon after we met and I'm getting to know you, we're building this deep connection. All of a sudden, I hear that you've gotten into a car accident. And I would love for you to tell our sisters about that time where you had just taken the leap, you becoming an entrepreneur, and then you literally almost died.
Oh my God. I had given Disney 2 months' notice, and I prepared for this move where I was going to launch this new business and be a stay at home mom for the first time in my then 12 years of marriage. I had a plan, y'all, and come hell or high water, I was going to work that plan. And I get there I'm on a Saturday, U-Haul still in driveway. And I wake up the next morning. My husband had left his phone, had left for a 6 a.m. meeting, left his phone. And I'm giving you this context because this happened before the accident. I'm just going to sum it up by saying that what I found on that phone was the catalyst for the beginning of the end of my marriage. And I had been not even 24 hours in this new city. I did not move there with divorce as a topic. We needed to reconnect, but I did not know that there was trouble that needed to be addressed. And so that first night started the next 3 months of discussion of what are we doing in this marriage? Are we staying? Are we going? Are we fixing? Or are we leaving? And then before we could make that decision, 3 months later, I did something I had rarely ever done. But again, I'm in a city where I know no one. I left my fifth grader at home while I made ran a quick errand. And I got in a near fatal accident. I had to be taken to the hospital for emergency surgery that that night. um, my husband at the time, not the best communicator. My daughter she said, "Daddy, is mommy going to be okay?" And he said, "No, she's not." I don't know why he chose that response. And that started anxiety and trauma in her life that I wasn't aware of until much later.
Mm.
But if you can imagine, I don't know, 7, 8 day hospital stay after surgery, I had almost lost the bottom extremity of my leg. So from the ankle down was nearly severed. They didn't know if they'd be able to save it that night. It was not only was it crushed, the bone was dislocated and the foot was almost detached. So it was extremely painful. It was, I can't even describe, and I have a very high pain tolerance. I
Mm.
am not one to whimper about pain, but the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life, when I finally was able to go home, occupational therapy had to come. There was a hospital bed in the dining room of my living room. My husband was coaching at the time, and they had just started their season. We were not on good terms. I knew no one to pick my daughter up from school, take her to school. The assistant principal ended up taking her back and forth. I I would stick a sandwich in a lounge jacket and hop. I was non-weight bearing. I could not put pressure on that leg for 8 months. I just don't know if I can describe it enough to tell you what a low point. I'm in that hospital bed watching my marriage fall apart, watching my child raise herself. It took weeks before the pain was manageable enough for me to even know who's combing her hair, like who's making sure she bathes. I can barely remember how she was functioning during that time, what she was going through. And I'm a very in touch parent normally. So it was just traumatic for all of us, and particularly me and her.
I can only imagine. I remember having a front row seat, and because I had met you at what felt like such a high point, becoming an entrepreneur, taking a chance on yourself, just seeing you as this powerful and empowered woman, to walking through, you had a beautiful home, walking through the doors of your home and looking at a hospital bed in the middle of the dining room and not knowing what to say or what to do or how to help. I'll make Jordan a sandwich. That's about all I had. I think one time I came over, I made her grilled cheese. But just watching you go from being so strong to not being coherent because you're on pain medication. You got to, make sure that you're all right. And having these questions about how is Jordan doing and what does she need? And then the questions surrounding what was going on with you and your husband at the time. I just remember thinking, why is this happening to you?
I just want your podcast listeners to understand that wherever you're strongest on the inside, that is what the enemy attacks. So that woman that you met and thought was so confident and self-esteem so high, Those are the very things. It wasn't about the physical pain. Anyone who's ever been through divorce understands how empathy can leave from the other person. There was no empathy at the time, and this is just our truth, so I don't mind sharing. At the time, he would walk past that hospital bed and go upstairs and barely a grunt. I may as well have been a piece of furniture at the time. I couldn't get my hair done. And I know that sounds silly to even mention, but I'm gaining weight because I can't move. I can't walk. So I'm laying in this bed. I'm looking the worst I've ever looked. I'm feeling the worst. And it's not a why me in moments like that. It's how do I survive? I have never had lower esteem than I call it my Savannah experience. Than the months that followed that accident. I lost my independence. I lost my ability to launch a business. When you would visit my home before, I kept fresh flowers. If I didn't figure out a way to hop up and turn a light on, I might be in the dark. There was a period where I didn't leave the house for 12 days. And when I would ask someone to take me out so I could feel the sun, it was a nuisance. It was treated like I felt such empathy for anyone with a physical disability because
Yeah.
the way the person closest to me acted when I wanted to get out of the house for a minute. It was as if I was a bother. That's a nuisance. That's too much trouble. That wheelchair is too big. I was miserable. I was sad. I was hurt. And I had no idea what I needed to do to pick up those pieces and move forward.
Mm. And then you did. And you did it in a way I have never seen anyone do it before. You just chose and left and didn't look back. And I want you to share with us, because this is sort of like what then capstones the experience, because then you transitioned and you left, you had a Savannah experience, and then you left the Savannah experience and went and had an Atlanta experience, which became sort of the mark of the way that I said it to you earlier was that when most people go through a divorce, they lose their life. I watched you go through a divorce and got your whole life. I'm talking about you created such success, such brilliant, beautiful, incredible, such a beautiful, incredible life on the other side of it. So talk to us a little bit about how you were able to muster what you needed to make that choice and create that life for yourself.
Those days of laying in that hospital bed, at some point, something turned. And and it was probably my child, like my pure sheer will, my mama bear, that is like, I cannot lay here and die. So something in me said, I'll show you. I will show you. You must have forgotten who I am.
Hmm.
I must have forgotten who I am. And I don't know, it was God and the angels and all the things that were rallying in the background on those days where I felt like I'm not going to make it out of this. Though all of those things came together in a moment, and I was like, I will show you. And whoever you was at the time, you can take a guess. It was the world. It was the people I thought would show up that didn't bring me a sandwich. It was everybody. I'll show you. And it was also divine orchestration where
Mm.
my cousin ran into a sorority sister. Her husband he owned a publishing company. He worked mainly with CEOs, senior level executives. And she gave me his number and him mine. in order to connect us to get my book published at the time. Well, I never called because I was in a hospital bed. And the book wasn't written. And so he called me and said, hey, I have an engineering firm CEO. He wants to write a book about servant-based leadership. He wants a fiction fable to start the book, and I want you to write it. The rest is history. I co-wrote that book. It's called Fire Yourself as Your Own Higher Power. Can be found on Amazon by Willie Stewart. But I co-wrote that book from that hospital bed, and it re-energized me. And that was God's wink. I've got you. You can do this. And I just began to wake up after that. I left that marriage, and I'm actually grateful that the reaction to my accident, the non-support, the non-empathy, I'm grateful that it was so extreme because we were undecided before that. And that made the decision clear. And I could barely walk when the separation happened, but I got out of that place we were in. I, for the first time in 20 years, moved in a tiny apartment. I looked for a job. I drove to whatever city I had to drive to. I got a job back in corporate again, and I moved back to Atlanta. I saved. I got my credit score up. I did all the things because I was going to buy a house. This time only in my name. And I did just that. And that house was in Alpharetta, Georgia, in Atlanta, which is, such a nice area, beautiful home. And I wanted my daughter to get stable and stay stable. And that's what that house meant to me. I relaunched this business. I left corporate as soon as I could again. And I relaunched this business, and I have not looked back. It's been one blessing after another, open door after open door, putting me in rooms before men and women greater than I could have ever imagined. I know at one point I thought, if I could just make what I made my highest salary in corporate, I'll be okay. Well, in 2023, I exceeded that. And that's not to paint entrepreneurship as if it doesn't come with peaks and valleys. We know it does, but I'm grateful. I'm here.
Ellena, when we think about the sisters who are listening to this, what would you say is the most vulnerable part of going through major life transitions, especially when someone else, a little appendage like a child, is watching? What's most vulnerable about that? What do you think they might be experiencing right now if this is their story?
Well, the most vulnerable part is feeling like you don't have permission or time or space to break down, to have the breakdown you might need, to show the emotion that you may need to show. But you have no choice. You have, at some point, little appendage or not, you have to become human. And you don't ever want to be that in front of your children. It's a mistake, I think, that most of us make as parents, but I didn't want to be, but it ended up being the best life lesson for her.
So good.
It's keeping those things from even my friends. I at first was not you. I was used to presenting as I presented to you, confident, high self-esteem. And for the first time with my friends of 30 years, they had to see me limp and struggle for a while and be not that confident, not have that high self-esteem. And so that was the hardest part. Having a daughter looking, she was 11 when we separated, but 12 by the time we divorced. Having her look on, I think it turned that I'll show you into a reminder that she's watching. It was less about proving anything to anybody else and more about making her proud. I think our kids want to make us proud and we want to make them proud. Um, and she needed to know I was human.
Yes.
When we moved back to Atlanta, again, I don't want to paint a rosy picture. When we were physically moving into our first place here, the mover broke her purple mirror. And she, at 12 years old, and those who know her, she's a tall girl. So she was a tall 12, very mature always.
Mm-hmm.
She sat in the middle of the floor and basically bawled, threw a tantrum. And I knew it had nothing to do with the broken mirror. I'm going to cry. It had nothing to do with the broken mirror, but everything to do with all the transition happening. She was tired. She was tired. And she had been an adult for me. When I couldn't walk, but I could drive, I would send her in the store in Savannah with a list and a budget. And she was 10. She was 10 or 11 at the time. And I think if she had been tall enough, I would have made her drive, poor baby. Who knows, who taught her personal hygiene at that time. She was a preteen. I had taught her what I taught her up until 9 or 10, but she had gone through a whole year of kind of raising herself and being some sort of semi-adult assistant to me. That's not what you want for your kids. And I had high expectations and high dreams for her. Thank God she ended up getting there anyway, but it wasn't always easy. But she saw me fight. She saw me fight for her and fight for myself.
She also saw you heal, Ellena, and I want to hear from you as we bring this conversation to a close. How did you heal? And in healing yourself, how do you think you helped heal Jordan?
For one thing, I rediscovered who I was. You sometimes don't realize how much of yourself you lose in trauma and transition and surviving. But I got divorced and went through the grocery store tired, had worked all day, limping at the time still. And I remember looking at tuna, and for the first time in 13, 14 years at that point, I remembered I liked tuna. My ex-husband hated it. Jordan hated everything he hated. So she hated it. And at some point, very early in the marriage, I stopped buying it because no one liked it but me. And why would I buy something only I like? I forgot I like live music and concerts. I forgot what a free spirit I was.
Yes.
I had become so buttoned up and corporate and just trying to keep those balls in the air, trying so hard that I forgot that I'm a bit of a ditz. Let's see what happened. Let's just try it. I was very spontaneous. I'm a creative at heart, and I forgot that. So reconnecting with myself was one way I healed myself. Giving myself time. I thank God, did not lean on coping mechanisms like alcohol and sex and relationships. I gave myself time. I rediscovered who I was, and I loved on the people that loved on me. I loved on my baby. I loved on myself. I loved on my family and friends, my village, on you and whomever else extended themselves. I found a new appreciation for those things. And I think I found a new appreciation for me. That was healing for me because that trauma, I lost a lot of the good stuff I loved about myself during that trauma. And finding it again was like a life preserver.
Wow. So, Ellena, what would you say to our sisters, our listeners? How would you dare them to heal themselves so that they can heal others?
I dare you to rediscover those things about yourself that life may have attempted to change or life may have um, taken out of you temporarily. Rediscover those things. I mean, with a vengeance, chase those things and have a PhD in you. I mean, that may sound cliche-ish, but I mean it. Like, don't let anybody know you better than you know you. um, Give yourself time to heal, like time meaning don't 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 cope, let the hurt happen and let go to whatever power that you go to for healing. Go to your higher power and really chase that with all your might, because the answer is not in any coping mechanism, not even success, not even achievement. Um, it's within you. And take that time with yourself. That's what I say. And tell your testimony. Wherever you can share your story with another sister, share it and let her know she's not alone.
Ellena, speaking of don't hide behind or cope with accomplishments and achievements, you and I talk a lot about that as we write and edit my book. And I just want to let sisters know, especially those of you who have a book on your heart, whether you've started writing, you've completed writing, you just have a good idea, you need to be across a Zoom room, across a physical room if you're in Atlanta, from Ellena Balkcom. She will bring your ideas, your book, your baby to life. Ellena did something incredible with me last year. We did a VIP day where I flew to her and we started to get super clear because I had already written my book twice and it wasn't going where I wanted it to go. And doing some real development around my audience and what I wanted to say and what she needed to hear. Spending those 2 days with her, it changed the trajectory of my book. This is something that was very exclusive for her. It was only for a few of her clients. And in 2024, she just began to extend it to the mass public. And so if you have a book on your heart, if you're looking for support, you need a developmental editor or any help around communications, you need to go to writtenonpurpose.com, see Ellena's work, and then email her at Ellena, ELLENA, at writtenonpurpose.com. Ellena, thank you so much for being vulnerable, sharing your experience. And I thank Jordan for lending her mommy to us today so we could hear all of your wise words.
Thank you so much for having me, Nandi. I loved every moment of it.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, I invite you to join us and listen to the other podcasts that are a part of this season. We're really excited as the Truth and Dare movement to welcome you and being a part of this family, a part of this sisterhood. And if you're yearning for more real and authentic conversations, subscribe to the podcast. If you want to learn more about the Truth and Dare movement, go to truththandare.com, sign up for my email list, and check out my services and offerings, including live events. We encourage you to listen, we encourage you to comment, and we encourage you to share your stories with us too at hello@truththandare.com. And most importantly, we dare you to dream. Until next time, take care.